The final bell rang, signaling the start of the weekend. At Northwood Elementary, the schoolyard erupted into a symphony of joyful chaos. Children streamed out of the classrooms, their laughter echoing off the brick walls as they ran to their waiting parents, chattering excitedly about the upcoming Family Day festival next Friday. But amidst the happy commotion, twin sisters Mia and Chloe sat quietly on a bench, their small legs dangling, not quite reaching the ground. They watched as their classmates were swept up in hugs, their hands filled with snacks, their voices animated as they recounted the day's events. Everyone's already talking about the pioneer costumes they're going to wear and how their parents are going to film them, Chloe murmured, kicking at a loose pebble on the pavement. It's just us who'll be alone. At least we have a mom, Mia replied, always the more practical of the two. Even if she can't come, Chloe pouted. But Peter's mom doesn't even work, and his dad is taking the day off just to see him do the square dance, and he's not even a good dancer. They fell silent, the memory of that morning's conversation hanging heavy between them. Their mother, Ava, had found the flyer for the Family Day presentation in Chloe's backpack. With tears in her eyes, she had explained that she couldn't possibly miss her shift at the restaurant on a Friday. It was the busiest day of the week, and she was already on thin ice after having to take a day off when Mia got sick last month. It was then that the twins noticed a sleek black car pull up across the street. It was the kind of car that didn't belong in their neighborhood, all polished chrome and tinted windows. A young man in a dark, well-tailored suit stepped out. He glanced at his expensive-looking watch, a frown creasing his brow, and pulled out his phone. "Look at that man," Chloe nudged her sister. "He looks important." Mia observed the stranger with quiet curiosity. "But is he someone's dad?" "I don't think so," Chloe replied thoughtfully. "I've never seen him before." The man began to pace the sidewalk, speaking into his phone, his gestures sharp and impatient. He seemed a little lost, or perhaps just late. Suddenly, Chloe stood up from the bench. "Let's go talk to him." "What? Why?" Mia asked, startled by her sister's suggestion. "I don't know," Chloe shrugged, her mind already made up. "I just have a feeling." "Mom told us not to talk to strangers," Mia reminded her, her voice hesitant. "We're just going to ask if he's lost," Chloe replied, already pulling her sister by the hand. "Come on." Without giving Mia a chance to protest further, Chloe started walking purposefully toward the school gate. Mia followed reluctantly, glancing back to see if any of the teachers were watching. The twins stepped out of the gate and paused on the sidewalk. The man was still across the street, now ending his phone call. "Let's wait for him to finish," Chloe whispered, as if they were on a secret mission. The man, whose name was Ethan Hayes, was having a complicated day. His GPS had led him to the wrong address, and now he was late for an important meeting. "Tell Mr. Silva I'll be there in 20 minutes, Max," he said into his phone before hanging up. It was then that he noticed two identical little girls watching him from across the street. They were dressed in simple school uniforms, their light brown hair tied in matching pigtails. They were staring at him with an undisguised curiosity. He smiled faintly, amused by the situation. He gave the girls a brief wave and turned his attention back to his phone, trying to figure out the correct route. To his surprise, the twins crossed the street and stopped a few feet away from him. One of them, apparently the bolder of the two, took a step forward. "Hi, are you lost?" Ethan raised his eyebrows, surprised by the direct approach. "A little," he admitted. "I'm looking for a company's address." The girl nodded, as if that made perfect sense. "I thought so. You look important. You're wearing a suit." He couldn't help but smile. "And you're very observant. What's your name?" "I'm Chloe, and this is my sister Mia. We're twins." "I noticed," he replied, putting his phone in his pocket. There was something about these girls that intrigued him. Perhaps it was the confidence with which they approached a stranger, or the contrast between their expressions, one shy, the other fearless. "And what's your name?" Chloe asked, looking him directly in the eye. The man hesitated for a moment, as if considering whether he should answer. "Ethan," he said finally. Ethan Hayes. That's a nice name, Mia commented, speaking for the first time. Her voice was softer than her sister's. Thank you, Ethan smiled. You know, you probably shouldn't be talking to strangers. You don't seem dangerous, Chloe replied with a simple, disarming logic. And we're right in front of the school. Everyone can see us. Ethan glanced around, noticing a few adults watching the scene with cautious attention. He made sure to maintain a respectful distance from the children. We have a party at school on Friday, Chloe continued, changing the subject abruptly. We're going to do a square dance and show our family drawings. That sounds very nice, Ethan replied, playing along. Our mum can't go, Mia explained, looking down at her shoes. She has to work to pay the bills. Ethan felt a pang in his chest at the girl's frankness. I'm sorry to hear that. Everyone else is bringing their parents, Chloe added, her voice revealing a hint of sadness. It's just us who'll be alone on stage. We only have our mom, Mia continued, but she has 2 jobs. The teacher said it's mandatory to have someone from the family there, Chloe said, looking down at her own shoes now. But we don't have anyone else. That must be difficult for you, Ethan commented, genuinely touched. It's worse during the presentations, Mia said quietly, when everyone has someone watching and clapping for them. Peter is bringing his dad and his mom, Chloe recounted, crossing her arms, and he can't even sing right. He sounds like a frog. Ethan couldn't suppress a laugh. And you two sing well. The teacher says we do, Mia replied with a small smile. We've practiced a lot. I'm the best in the class, Chloe stated with conviction. But no one will be there to see it. I'm sure you'll do great, Ethan said, glancing at his watch. He really needed to go, but something about these girls kept him from simply saying goodbye and leaving. Do you have kids? Chloe asked, studying him with curiosity. Ethan shook his head. No, I'm not married. Why not? Chloe continued, ignoring her sister's disapproving look. Chloe, Mia scolded, blushing. You don't ask that. Ethan laughed again. It's okay. I guess I just never found the right person. Our mum doesn't have a husband either, Mia explained. She says it's just the 3 of us against the world. And you seem to be doing a good job of it, Ethan commented with a gentle smile. Chloe looked at her sister as if asking for permission for something. Mia gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. You could be our dad for the presentation, Chloe said suddenly, her voice clear and direct. Just on Friday, to see us sing. Ethan was completely speechless. The unexpected request caught him totally off guard. It would just be for 1 day, Mia added shyly. No one would know you're not our real dad. We just need someone to clap for us, Chloe explained. So we're not the only ones without anyone. It's at 10 o'clock, Mia said, her eyes filled with a hopeful light. If you don't have a meeting at that time. Ethan looked at the girls, surprised by the audacity of their request. A part of him wanted to say yes immediately, moved by the sadness in their eyes. But another, more rational part knew it would be strange for an adult to show up pretending to be the father of children he barely knew. I don't know if that would be appropriate, he said finally. We hardly know each other. We wouldn't tell anyone, Chloe insisted. It would be our secret. I understand you're disappointed that your mother can't go, Ethan said gently, but I don't know if I can help in that way. The light in the twins' faces dimmed. Chloe looked down, trying to hide her disappointment. It's okay, Mia said with a small smile. It was just an idea. A silly idea, Chloe murmured. It's not silly, Ethan hurried to say, touched by their sadness. It's just complicated. We understand, Mia replied, taking her sister's hand. Sorry to have bothered you. You didn't bother me, Ethan assured them. It was a pleasure to meet you. We have to go now, Chloe said, her voice less cheerful than before. The teacher will be worried. Of course, Ethan nodded. Good luck with your presentation. I'm sure you'll do great. The twins gave him a brief wave and started to walk away. After a few steps, Chloe stopped and turned around. It's at Northwood Elementary, she said, pointing to the building behind them. Friday, 10 o'clock, in case you change your mind. Before Ethan could respond, the girls had already crossed the street and were disappearing through the school gate. He stood there, watching them go until they were out of sight. His phone rang, bringing him back to reality. It was his assistant, wondering why he still hadn't arrived at the meeting. "I'm on my way," Ethan replied, getting into his car. As he drove, he couldn't get the encounter with the twins out of his head. There was something about them that had touched him deeply. The request for him to pretend to be their father for a day was absurd, of course. He barely knew them. He had no obligation to them. And yet the idea of them being alone on stage, while all the other children had their parents in the audience, bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Northwood Elementary, he murmured to himself. Friday, 10 o'clock. On Friday morning, the auditorium at Northwood Elementary was buzzing with the excited energy of parents and children. The air was filled with the scent of popcorn and the sound of proud chatter. Fathers and mothers, armed with cameras and smartphones, staked out the best seats, ready to capture every moment of their children's performances. Backstage, the atmosphere was a mix of nervous excitement and last-minute preparations. Teachers herded their students into lines, adjusting costumes and whispering final words of encouragement. Amidst the controlled chaos, Mia and Chloe stood quietly in a corner, their initial disappointment having settled into a quiet resignation. They were going to be the only ones without anyone in the audience. "Do you think he'll come?" Mia asked, her voice a hopeful whisper as she straightened the ribbon on her sister's dress. Chloe shrugged, trying to appear indifferent, a defense mechanism she had perfected over the years. "Of course not. He didn't even say he would." "But he didn't say he wouldn't," Mia argued, ever the optimist. "He's an important man, Mia," Chloe replied, her voice flat. "He probably has more important things to do than pretend to be the dad of two girls he doesn't even know. It was a silly idea." Mia sighed. "It was." Chloe nodded, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of the hope she was trying so hard to extinguish. The teacher began to call the children into formation. "Kindergarten class, you're next. Remember to smile." The twins took their places side by side, holding their drawings. As the heavy velvet curtain began to open, their eyes immediately scanned the audience, more out of habit than actual expectation. The rows were filled with smiling, waving parents. Several children on stage were already proudly pointing out their families in the crowd. The twins felt that familiar pang of sadness, the quiet ache of being the exception in a room full of complete families. And then they saw him. Almost at the very back of the auditorium, leaning against the wall as if he had arrived too late to get a seat, stood Ethan Hayes. He was dressed in the same dark suit, his expression serious and attentive as he watched the stage. When his eyes met theirs, he smiled, a small, discreet but incredibly warm smile, and gave them a slight nod. The faces of Mia and Chloe lit up simultaneously. The surprise and joy were so intense that for a moment they forgot where they were. They squeezed each other's hands, barely able to contain their excitement. "He came," Mia whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I knew it," Chloe replied, though her tone betrayed her own surprise. The presentation began. One by one, the children showed their drawings and sang short songs about their families. When it was the twins' turn, they walked to the center of the stage with a newfound confidence they hadn't felt just moments before. "This is our family drawing," Chloe announced, holding up the colorful paper. "It's me, my sister Mia, and our mom. Our mom works very hard to take care of us," Mia added, her voice surprisingly firm. "She couldn't be here today, but we know she loves us very much." The twins then began to sing a song about family. Their sweet, clear voices filled the auditorium. Throughout their performance, their eyes constantly sought out Ethan in the back of the room. He smiled and watched them with an attentiveness that made it seem as if he really were the proud father they had asked him to pretend to be. When they finished, the auditorium erupted in applause. Ethan clapped more enthusiastically than anyone, and the twins could have sworn they saw a glint of emotion in his eyes. At the end of the presentation, as the other children ran to hug their parents, Mia and Chloe walked off the stage and timidly made their way to Ethan. "You really came," Chloe said, her eyes shining. "You were incredible," Ethan replied, genuinely impressed. "You sing beautifully." "Thank you for coming," Mia said, more reserved but equally happy. "No one ever—" She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't have to. Ethan understood what she meant. "It was my pleasure," he replied, feeling an unexpected wave of emotion. "You invited me. I couldn't miss it. The other kids thought you were our real dad," Chloe recounted proudly. "We didn't say you weren't." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. How could two children he barely knew affect him so much? "It's okay," he said, his voice a little hoarse. "It's our secret." The twins smiled back at him, and in that moment, something shifted inside Ethan. Maybe it was their innocence, or the way they looked at him with such admiration, or simply the fact that they had trusted him, a complete stranger, to fill, even for a few hours, a void in their lives. "You were great," he repeated, not quite knowing what else to say. "Really. Thank you for being our dad today," Chloe said, with that disarming frankness that seemed to be her trademark. Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice to respond. "We have to go now," Mia explained. "The teacher is calling everyone back to the classroom." "Of course," Ethan replied, composing himself. It was very nice to meet you." The twins gave him one last wave and walked away, hand in hand as always. Ethan watched them until they disappeared into the crowd of happy families. Something had changed in him, a desire he never knew he had, the desire to protect, to care for, to be a part of these children's lives, was now making itself known. As he left the school, Ethan already knew that this encounter had touched his heart in a way he hadn't expected. The sad look in the girls' eyes, their courage in approaching him, the simplicity of their request, all of it had awakened something inside him that he couldn't explain. What he couldn't imagine was how that simple, innocent request would change his life forever. As the other families lingered, taking photos and congratulating their children, Ethan remained at the back of the auditorium, a silent observer. He couldn't just leave. The image of the twins walking away, hand in hand, back to a world where they had to be brave and self-sufficient, stayed with him. He felt an inexplicable pull, a sense of responsibility that went beyond a simple act of kindness. He decided to wait at the school's entrance. The final bell hadn't rung yet, but the Family Day presentation had been a special event. As other families began to leave, their cars filling the parking lot, Ethan checked his watch. He had already cancelled 2 important meetings to be there, and now he found himself considering cancelling the rest of his day. After nearly an hour, the classroom doors opened, and the children began to pour out. Ethan spotted the twins immediately. They were walking hand in hand, chattering excitedly, their faces still bright with the joy of their successful performance. When they saw him, they stopped for a moment, surprised that he was still there. Then identical smiles spread across their faces as they ran towards him. "You're still here," Chloe exclaimed with contagious enthusiasm. "We thought you had already left," Mia added, more reserved but equally happy. Ethan smiled, surprised by his own relief at seeing them again. "I wanted to say a proper goodbye," he explained. "You were both really incredible up there." "Everyone thought you were our real dad," Chloe recounted, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "The teacher asked where you were from, and we just said it was a surprise." Ethan laughed, fascinated by the girl's spontaneity. A sudden idea popped into his mind, and before he could think it through, the words had already escaped. "Have you had lunch yet? I was thinking we could get something to eat together to celebrate your performance." The twins' eyes widened in perfect sync. "Like at a restaurant?" Chloe asked, incredulous. "If you'd like," Ethan replied, realizing too late that he might be crossing a line. "Of course, if you have other plans, or if you need to get home—" "We don't have plans," Mia hurried to say. "We usually just go home by ourselves and make a sandwich. Mom only gets home from her first job at 3. Ethan felt a pang of sadness. at the thought of the girls returning to an empty apartment, preparing their own lunch. Children of 6 or 7 shouldn't have to spend so much time alone. "So what do you think?" he asked. "I know a place nearby with the best milkshakes in the city." "Milkshakes?" Chloe's eyes lit up. "Can we really?" "Of course," Ethan smiled. "You deserve it after that performance." Mia, always the more cautious one, hesitated. "Mom told us not to go to places with strangers." "She's right," Ethan agreed seriously. "That's a very important rule. But we already know each other, don't we? And we're in public, where everyone can see us." Mia considered this for a moment, then nodded. "I guess it's okay. Just this once. What do you think, Chloe?" "I think I'm hungry," Chloe replied promptly, making Ethan laugh. "It's settled then," he said, offering a hand to each of them. "Let's go celebrate your performance." The twins took his hands without hesitation, and together they walked to his car. Ethan helped them with their seatbelts in the back, struck by how natural it felt, as if he had done it 100 times before. The restaurant Ethan chose wasn't far, a family-friendly place with outdoor seating and a varied menu. It wasn't the kind of establishment he usually frequented, but it seemed appropriate for the occasion. Seated at a table on the patio, with colorful umbrellas shielding them from the sun, Ethan watched the twins study the menu with solemn expressions, as if it were a task of extreme importance. "Can I order anything?" Chloe asked, her eyes scanning the colorful pictures. "Of course," Ethan replied. "Whatever you want. Even French fries?" Mia asked, almost in a whisper, as if she were afraid of pushing her luck. "Especially French fries," Ethan confirmed, feeling a strange mix of joy and sadness. It was clear that a simple lunch at a restaurant was a rare treat for them. After they placed their orders, burgers, fries, and chocolate milkshakes for the girls, and a sandwich for Ethan, they fell into a surprisingly easy conversation. "So, you always go home from school by yourselves?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Mia nodded. "Most of the time. Mom works at a store in the morning and at a restaurant at night. She only has Sundays off," Chloe added, playing with the straw of her milkshake. "But even then, she sometimes picks up an extra shift." "That must be hard for you," Ethan commented. "We manage," Mia replied with a maturity that didn't match her age. "I know how to heat up food in the microwave, and we already know how to take showers by ourselves and do our homework. I help Mia with math, and she helps me with reading," Chloe added proudly. Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. These children had already learned to be independent in a way no child should have to. "Mom says it'll be easier when she finishes college," Mia explained, as if feeling the need to defend her mother. "She studies at night, when we're already asleep." "Your mother sounds like an incredible person," Ethan commented sincerely, "working, studying, and taking care of you." "She's the best mom in the world," Chloe stated with conviction. "But sometimes we wish we had a dad too." Mia nudged her sister as if to scold her for her frankness, but Chloe just shrugged. "It's true," she insisted. "Everyone at school has a dad, except us." "You've never met your father?" Ethan asked hesitantly, unsure if he was treading on forbidden territory. The twins shook their heads simultaneously. "Mom said he left before we were born," Mia explained. "She doesn't like to talk about it much." "But we have pictures of him," Chloe added. "Mom keeps them in a box under her bed." "Chloe," Mia chided, "we're not supposed to go through Mom's things." "I didn't go through them," Chloe defended herself. "I saw them when I was looking for my lost sock." Ethan watched the interaction with fascination. It was clear that despite their identical appearance, the girls' personalities were completely different. One was cautious and responsible, the other impulsive and direct. "Do you have a lot of friends at school?" Ethan asked, deliberately changing the subject. The conversation flowed naturally as they ate. The twins told him about their teachers, their favorite subjects, their classmates. Ethan listened with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at the stories they told with such enthusiasm. "And you?" Chloe asked suddenly as she finished her milkshake. "Were you always rich?" "Chloe!" Mia exclaimed, looking mortified. "I'm sorry," she added, looking at Ethan. "She has no filter." Ethan laughed. "It's okay. And no, I wasn't born rich. In fact, I grew up in very different circumstances than what I have today." The twins looked at him with renewed curiosity. "What do you mean?" Mia asked. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't used to talking about his past, especially with people he had just met. But there was something in the children's sincerity that made him want to be equally sincere. "Well, when I was a kid, about your age, my family didn't have much money," he began. "My mother also worked 2 jobs, just like yours." "Really?" Chloe seemed genuinely surprised. "But you have such a nice car." Ethan smiled. "That came much later. When I was little, we lived in a very small apartment, and sometimes it was hard to pay all the bills." "Were you also home alone?" Mia asked. "Many times," Ethan confirmed. "And I also had to learn to fend for myself early on." "And your dad?" Chloe asked directly. "Did he leave like ours?" Ethan felt a pang at the memory of his father. "Not exactly. He was physically present, but he had problems. He drank a lot and wasn't a very responsible person." The twins watched him with absolute attention, as if every word were important. "But how did you get rich?" Chloe wanted to know. Ethan laughed at the frankness of the question. "I studied a lot. I got a scholarship to college. Then I worked hard. I had some good ideas and a little bit of luck too." "See, Mia," Chloe nudged her sister. "Mom is right. If we study, we can be rich one day too. It's not just about money," Ethan added gently. "It's about doing something you love, and that makes a difference." When they finished eating, Ethan realized he had spent almost 2 hours talking with the girls. The time had flown by in a way that rarely happened in his business lunches. "I think it's time to take you home," he said, looking at his watch. A brief look of disappointment crossed the twins' faces, but they nodded in understanding. "This was the best lunch of my life," Chloe declared solemnly, making Ethan smile. "Mine too," he replied, surprised by the sincerity of his own statement. On the way to the car, Ethan made an impulsive decision. "If you tell me your address, I can drive you home. It's safer than you going back by yourselves." The girls exchanged a look, as if consulting each other silently. "Mom only gets home at 3, Mia remembered. "But I guess it's okay. Apartment 302, Colibri Building, Orchid Street," Chloe recited promptly. During the short drive to the apartment, Ethan found himself thinking about how that day had taken a completely unexpected turn. What had started as an impulsive act of kindness, attending the school presentation of 2 girls he barely knew, had turned into something much more significant. The Colibri Building was a modest 4-story building without an elevator in a simpler part of the city. Ethan parked the car and accompanied the twins to the 3rd floor. "This is it," Mia announced, stopping in front of door 302. She took out a key attached to a cord hidden under her uniform blouse. "Do you want to come in?" Chloe invited as Mia opened the door. "We can show you our drawings." Ethan hesitated. Entering the apartment of 2 children without their parents' presence seemed inappropriate. On the other hand, leaving them alone also worried him. "Just for a moment," he finally decided, "to make sure you'll be okay." The apartment was small but surprisingly cozy. A living room combined with a kitchen, 2 small bedrooms visible through ajar doors, and a bookshelf filled with books that took up almost an entire wall. There were plants on the windowsills and children's drawings taped to the refrigerator. The place exuded simplicity, but also care and effort. "Mom made that bookshelf," Mia explained proudly, noticing Ethan's gaze. "She likes to fix things." "And those are our plants," Chloe pointed to the small pots on the windowsill. "We take care of them every day." Ethan was about to comment on the apartment when he heard the sound of keys in the door. The twins turned, surprised. "It's Mom!" Mia exclaimed. "She never gets home this early." The door opened and a young woman entered, carrying a grocery bag. She looked tired, but smiled when she saw her daughters, until she noticed Ethan standing in the living room. The smile vanished instantly, replaced by an expression of shock. The bag slipped from her hands, scattering apples across the floor. "Ava," she began, but her voice failed her as she looked directly at Ethan. "Mum, this is Ethan," Chloe explained excitedly, apparently oblivious to the sudden tension. "He came to our presentation today and then took us out to lunch. We had burgers and milkshakes." Mia added, "He's really nice." Ava remained motionless, her face now pale as a sheet. Her eyes, identical to her daughter's, were fixed on Ethan, a mixture of recognition and barely concealed panic. "Nice to meet you," Ethan said, extending his hand automatically, even as he felt that something strange was happening. "The girls invited me in. I hope you don't mind." "Your face, it looks familiar," he added, trying to understand why the woman in front of him seemed so distraught by his presence. Ava swallowed hard, forcing a tense smile as she bent down to pick up the scattered apples. "You must be confusing me with someone else," she replied quickly, avoiding his gaze. "We've never met before." But there was something in the way she said it, an underlying tension, almost a tremor in her voice, that made Ethan doubt her immediately. He knew this woman from somewhere. He was sure of it. "But Mom, Ethan also grew up without much money, just like us," Chloe exclaimed, oblivious to the palpable tension between the adults. "And now he's rich and has an amazing car." "Chloe, Mia, why don't you go change your clothes?" Ava suggested, finally looking at her daughters. "I need to talk to Mr. Hayes." The girls seemed about to protest, but something in their mother's tone made them obey without question. Reluctantly, they headed to their room, casting curious glances over their shoulders before closing the door. When they were finally alone, the silence between Ethan and Ava was almost palpable. He looked at her more closely now, at the light brown hair tied in a simple bun, the tired but still intensely green eyes, identical to her daughter's. "I really feel like I know you from somewhere," Ethan insisted gently. Ava took a deep breath, as if gathering her courage. Her eyes finally met his, and in that moment Ethan felt it. A connection, a memory trying to surface. "You should leave," she said, her voice a little firmer now. "And please don't come back. The girls don't need false hopes in their lives." "False hopes?" Ethan repeated, confused. "Ava, what are you talking about?" "Why would you do this?" Ava questioned, crossing her arms defensively. "Why would a man like you be interested in two children you barely know?" The question caught him off guard. Why indeed? What had motivated him to attend the presentation, to invite them to lunch, to bring them home? "They asked me to," he replied simply, because it was the truth. "They wanted someone in the audience, and I couldn't say no." For a moment, Ava's expression softened, as if she understood exactly what he meant. Her daughters had that effect on people, the ability to break down barriers with their disarming sincerity. But then, just as quickly as it appeared, the softness was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. "I appreciate what you did," she said, opening the door in a clear invitation for him to leave. "But it would be better for everyone if this doesn't happen again." Ethan felt a strange reluctance to leave, as if he were leaving something important behind. But he respected her wishes, heading for the door. "They're extraordinary children," he said, pausing at the threshold. "You must be very proud." For a moment, Ava seemed about to say something more. There was a visible struggle in her eyes, as if she were debating some important decision internally. But in the end, she just nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes." As the door closed behind him, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't really a goodbye. There was something inexplicable about that family, something that drew him in a way he couldn't understand. And that feeling of familiarity when he looked at Ava, it wasn't just an impression. He knew her. He was sure of it. He just couldn't remember from where. 3 days had passed since the tense encounter at the apartment, and Ethan couldn't stop thinking about them. The image of the twins singing on stage, their faces lit up with joy, was constantly in his mind. And then there was Ava, with her haunted, familiar eyes. He knew he had to respect her wishes and stay away, but the feeling that he was leaving a crucial part of a story unfinished was overwhelming. He was sitting in his luxurious office, staring blankly at financial reports, when the memory hit him with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't a business meeting or a high society event. It was nearly 7 years ago, the grand opening of the Plaza Hotel, one of his first major real estate projects. He had been celebrating, drinking more than usual. He remembered a brief, intense conversation with a pretty waitress with striking green eyes. He'd bumped into her, causing her to drop a tray of glasses. He'd apologized, charmed her, and they had ended up talking for hours, a fleeting connection in a crowded room. He had left a generous tip and his business card, but never heard from her. Her name, he searched his memory. Ava. Her name was Ava. The realization sent a shockwave through him. He grabbed his phone and called his assistant. "Sarah, I need you to do something for me, and it needs to be completely discreet." He gave her Ava's full name, which he now remembered, and asked her to find any public records she could. An hour later, an email arrived. It contained birth certificates for 2 twin girls, Mia and Chloe Rossi, born 9 months after that night at the hotel. The mother's name was Ava Rossi. The father's name was listed as unknown. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. He was a father. He had 2 daughters. The inexplicable connection he felt, the pull towards them, it all made sense now. He looked at the photos of the twins on his phone, their identical smiles, their green eyes so like their mother's, and he saw himself in the shape of their faces, the stubborn set of their jaws. He knew he couldn't just show up at their door again. Ava had been terrified, and he now understood why. She had been protecting her daughters from a man she thought would never want them, a man from a world so different from hers. He had to approach this carefully. He had to earn her trust. The next day, he drove to Northwood Elementary and waited at a distance. When the final bell rang, he watched as Mia and Chloe came out, holding hands as always. They looked sadder than he had ever seen them, their usual bright energy gone. He saw them look around, a hopeful glance that quickly faded into disappointment. It broke his heart. He waited until they were a block away from the school before pulling his car up beside them. He rolled down the window, his heart pounding. "Mia, Chloe," they turned, their eyes widening in surprise. "Ethan!" Chloe exclaimed, a small smile finally appearing on her face. "I know I promised to stay away," he said gently, "but I couldn't. I was worried about you." He looked at their sad faces. "Is everything okay?" "Mum is sad," Mia said quietly. "She's been crying a lot." "I think I know why," Ethan said, his voice soft, "and I think it's my fault. I need to talk to her, to both of you. Can I give you a ride home?" The twins looked at each other, then nodded. When they arrived at the apartment, Ava opened the door, her expression a mixture of shock and fear when she saw him. "What are you doing here? I told you." "I know," Ethan interrupted gently, "but I remember now, Ava." The Plaza Hotel, 7 years ago. Ava's face crumpled, and she leaned against the doorframe for support. The secret she had carried alone for so long was finally out. "They're my daughters," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Aren't they?" Ava could only nod, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, is it true?" Chloe asked, her eyes wide. "Is Ethan our dad?" Ava knelt and pulled her daughters into a hug. "Yes, my loves, he is." That evening they talked for hours. Ethan listened as Ava told him about her struggles, about her fear of him rejecting them, about her fierce determination to give the girls a good life on her own. He, in turn, told her about his own lonely life, about how meeting the twins had awakened something in him he didn't know was missing. "I want to be their father, Ava," he said, his voice filled with a conviction he had never felt before. "I want to be here for all of you, if you'll let me." Ava looked at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time in 7 years she let go of her fear. "They've been waiting for you their whole lives," she whispered. The next few months were a whirlwind of change. Ethan became a constant, steady presence in their lives. He helped the girls with their homework, took them to the park on weekends, and attended every school event, no longer as a stranger in the back row, but as a proud father in the front. He and Ava slowly, carefully, began to build a relationship based not on a fleeting night, but on a shared love for their daughters and a deep, growing respect for each other. He bought them a house in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood with a big backyard perfect for a swing set. He enrolled Ava in the best university in the city so she could finish her degree without having to work 2 jobs. He didn't just give them money, he gave them his time, his attention, his heart. One afternoon, as they were all in the backyard planting flowers in a new garden, Chloe looked up at him, her face serious. "You know," she said, "that day at school we just asked you to pretend to be our dad for a day." Ethan smiled, kneeling down beside her. "I know. But you're not pretending anymore, are you?" Mia asked from the other side of the flower bed. "No," Ethan said, his heart swelling with a love he had never known. "I'm not pretending. This is real." He looked from his daughters to Ava, who was watching them with a radiant smile. This is forever. The man who had everything had discovered that his greatest treasure had been waiting for him all along, hidden in the hopeful eyes of 2 little girls on a school playground. And the family that had started with a desperate, innocent request had found its foundation in a love that was more real and powerful than any of them could have ever imagined.